This week on LTC News, a community kitchen.
This can be used for large batches of soup, sauces.
New dining options downtown.
One of the requirements for me was that it was downtown.
And the repercussions of ending DACA.
Can finish out the time in that program, but then it ends.
Stay with us. Welcome to LTC News. I'm your news anchor, Alanna Flood. The DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, was introduced by President Obama in 2012. The Trump administration recently canceled the program, causing repercussions for Lowell residents. To learn more, we spoke with Mari Zellner, an immigration attorney working in Lowell for the Northeast Justice Center, a subsidiary of Northeast Legal Aid.
DACA was a way that the Obama administration decided to offer protection from deportation and an opportunity for work authorization for young people who were brought to the United States as children who didn't have the right kind of status.
Although there are no hard numbers of DACA participants living in Lowell, they are undoubtedly here, legally attending school and working.
So many people are really so integrated into society. You wouldn't know that your neighbor or your friend or your, someone at your church is a DACA recipient. Most children couldn't apply for it until they had reached the age of 15, but there were younger kids who would age into the program over time. So I think when it was announced, a child had to have been in the United States for 5 years. So back in 2012, basically those kids who were 5 years old at the time slowly started to age into the program.
Some critics of DACA, including Attorney General Jeff Sessions, say that the program protects immigrants who are criminals. Zellner disputes that argument.
Individuals had to go through a rigorous background check screening process. And so there were certainly individuals who were interested in DACA who were denied that ability because of that background check. And so not all people who were eligible did ultimately apply, in part because of fear of what might happen, because DACA is a temporary, as we now know, is now planned to be terminated by the Trump administration, and so there was a lot of uncertainty around whether it was safe to apply. Part of the concern was that by giving all of this information to the federal government about someone who's undocumented, that there would then be negative consequences later, that there could be enforcement actions against those young people. And some people in the Department of Homeland Security that's in charge of that program have tried to reassure that that's not the intention, to use this private information that was given really to try to bring people out of the shadows to then try to prosecute them. But it remains to be seen what will ultimately happen with that information. Young people who have DACA right now, there was a small window of time when they could reapply if they were about to expire, but that window is now closed. So basically anybody who's in the program now, whatever amount of time they have, can finish out the time in that program, but then it ends. And if their application is pending, then they can get a renewal if it's already been submitted. But then 2 years from now, all of DACA will be over. There are several bills that are currently being discussed in Congress to formalize a similar program, but to make it a law. I should say that DACA itself was not a law, it was an executive order. So that's why it's been able to be implemented so quickly and taken away so quickly. In general, I get the sense sometimes that immigrants who have passed through are difficult to navigate system lawfully, may feel frustrated that undocumented immigrants maybe cut the line. I should say, though, to those individuals that there is no line for some people, and which is fundamentally unfair. The individuals who have come out of the shadows to put their information forward are looking for a path, any path, to formalize or legalize their status. And so we really want to be encouraging people to come out of the shadows, to become productive members of society, and not to oppress this population that could really be a resource for the rest of us, too, the entire economy.
Zellner tells her DACA clients not to panic because so much about this situation is still undecided. And now, Brian Dorrington, LTC Director of Municipal Programming, brings us his City Council Synopsis.
Hello and welcome to the first post-apocalyptic episode of the City Council Synopsis. I always wished the apocalypse would occur in my lifetime, but I never expected wind to be the culprit. Of course, I prayed for zombies and/or the Marshmallow Man. The realist in me had me leaning towards a meteor strike or hypochondria epidemic, but wind didn't even make the short list. The good news is you all survived, and we can now look forward to the next apocalypse, which will hopefully feature something cool like killer robots, aliens, and a cameo from Jean-Claude Van Damme. The meeting of October 24th started off with Mayor Kennedy presenting a letter from School Superintendent Dr. Salah Khalfawi. In the letter, Superintendent Khalfawi stated that he would not declare the 1922 high school building as surplus property should the high school move to the Cawley site. He presented multiple possible uses for the property, including a public school central office, an early childhood care center, a CSA day school, and a few other potential uses. Mayor Kennedy pointed out that this means at least part of the current high school couldn't be converted into luxury apartments or commercial space as has previously been suggested by some. City Manager Kevin Murphy presented a motion response that gave an update on the Lord Overpass project. The project is already fully funded through a mix of grants, state, and local funds. The total cost of the project is just under $19 million. The Thorndike Street widening portion of the project is fully designed and construction will start soon. Thorndike Street will be widened from the connector to the Gallagher Terminal, and construction is expected to be completed sometime in the summer. The Lord Overpass portion of the project is still in the design phase and expected to go out to bid next summer. The construction on that part of the project is estimated to take 2.5 years. There will be a public input session regarding this project on Monday, November 13th at 6 p.m. at the Pollard Memorial Library. The city will continue to hold presentations and meetings throughout the design process. The city manager presented the current estimate of ancillary costs in relation to the new high school should it move to Cawley. These are costs that are considered outside the scope of the project, and the estimated cost is believed to be $11 million. Councillor Leary questioned some of these costs included, stated he doesn't believe sidewalks are needed in some of the proposed areas. In a related motion, Councillor Milanazzo asked to have the administration write a report comparing the ancillary costs of the Cawley site and the downtown site for a comparison. The report is to include the direct impact to the taxpayer. Well, that's all I have for you today. Remember, you can watch the meetings in their entirety on LTC Channel 99, or on demand anytime at ltc.org. Thanks for watching, and be swell.
Although UTEC is known for working with at-risk youth, creating jobs and education opportunities, this year they created a different kind of enterprise designed to stimulate food entrepreneurship in Lowell. It's a big community kitchen that will help food businesses hit the ground running.
This is a really great space. It's a multi-use commercial community kitchen here in Lowell on Warren Street.
We call this Hotline 1. We have a tilt skillet. This can be used for large batches of soup, sauces. Shuck Truck boils their lobsters in here. You can also do canning in here. Regular convection oven, 6-burner stove, and a fryolator.
We really saw a void in the Lowell area for incubator kitchens. There are some down closer to Boston and in other areas, but there wasn't really anything like this in Lowell.
And then it's also an opportunity for us to create more programming for our young adults as well. So it's this two-sided coin that is really helping to bolster food justice in the community. We have a convection oven, a combi oven, which is both a steamer and a hot air oven, so it can be used for both purposes. We have a steam jacketed kettle, and coming soon we have a candy stove that's about to be hooked up.
The kitchen's used a variety of different ways, from clients who come in and use the space to produce food for their catering business, food truck, or other commercial application. We also make the space available for classes.
This is a large-scale professional baking oven that can fit 2 large speed racks on it at one time. This is also hooked up to plumbing, so it's steam compatible, so you can get that really great crust on your loaves of bread. For really big festivals, our caterers will spread out and they'll have the entire space covered with whatever they're making that day.
If you need assistance getting your product developed and up to market, we're partnering with E4All, who can give business and entrepreneurial assistance to you. And then you'll set up your hours and go to town down here.
This is where they store their small wares that they own personally. Per city health code, anything that you use in the facility, you have to store in the facility. We ask for an entire comprehensive suite of certifications. You need a ServSafe Manager certificate, you need your Allergen Awareness certificate, you need to have a food business license, and then you need a regular business license, both through the city of Lowell. So part of an entrepreneur's responsibilities is to clean up after themselves at the end of their shift. And to facilitate that, we offer a complete ware washing station. We have a bakery washer that fits sheet trays vertically upright. We have a 3-bay sink where you can rinse, wash, and sanitize. We also provide all cleaning supplies included in the rental. We have a deli slicer, food processor, 8-quart stand mixer, and a variety of scales for precise portioning. Complimentary ice. We have 300 square feet of refrigerated and frozen storage, 200 refrigerator, 100 freezer. As you can see, Delcer Naturals is very busy. They keep their frozen stock here. So we have cutting boards, sheet trays, Lexans, pots and pans, whisks, strainers, skillets, full comprehensive set of cookware that you can use while you're here. It does dovetail nicely with what we try to accomplish, which is a sense of community, increased jobs for the area, fighting food deserts. By having so many small businesses here, we are increasing the amount of food that's available within the community, and our entrepreneurs are growing, and as they grow, they're offering more jobs in the community as well.
Check UTEC's Community Kitchen website for more information on how to get involved. Now, talking about food, 2 new independently owned restaurants will whet your appetite. They're located within a few blocks of each other right downtown. Both opened in October and are worth checking out.
We decided that Lowell really needs something like this, and we wanted to create this really awesome space where everything is clean and bright and just simple.
One of the requirements for me was that it was downtown because I wanted someplace that our family could all be together and it really be a community environment.
Downtown Lowell has really been having this renaissance over the past few years, and we see this as kind of like the focal point of Lowell being the place, the destination, as we say in the city, destination Lowell.
Well, the food is first and foremost fresh. We have everything, it's a very small, fresh menu.
It's burgers, but elevated to another level because we're taking the burger as the palate and we're using my fine dining experience and Toby's fine dining experience to really elevate it and make it something that you tend not to see anywhere else.
There'll always be vegetarian, gluten-free, vegan options, and our chef is also willing to take ingredients and make something special for you if you ask.
For you awesome vegetarians out there, we have this really cool vegan burger, which happens to be gluten-free. The general philosophy about our food at Lowell Burger Company is that we're trying to use as many local ingredients as possible. We're doing as much as we can with local produce as well, but that's always limited by seasons.
At this time, we are doing dinner, but we're going to be doing lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch once we get completely up and running.
We open for lunch and dinner Monday through Saturday. We close on Sundays, so we close down for a few hours between 2:30 and 5 during the week as well. When the shades are down, the restaurant's closed.
We're coming up with something called the Warp Speed. So we're going to have a lot of options of lunches that can be ordered, eaten, depending on how fast you eat, and back to work within a half hour to 45 minutes, and grab and go lunches. So every Thursday night we have the open mic nights, and it's been really, really vibrant environment. And Friday night we have local original music, and at this point Saturday nights we have local music that's outside of the Merrimack Valley.
This spot that we're in is the Bon Marché building, and it's been in existence since, I believe, the late 1800s, and it's been a restaurant for the past almost 30 years. So it kind of seems like it makes sense because we wanted to bring classical and then new together in Lowell Burger Company.
I used to come here when it was the Dubliner, when I was a college student in the 80s. You know, this is a real mainstay of Lowell's history.
The way that we designed the restaurant, we wanted to keep the walls and the floors really clean. Then we're accenting it with all these really super awesome antique pieces that we found. And that cow, I saw that and I said, this is ours. We kind of like that industrial look. The whole idea of the restaurant is to be sort of this industrial chic with that really clean white walls of the tile.
Warp and weft is the weave of fabric, the warp and the weft. So it's our nod to the textile industry. We really wanted a feel that was warm. I love the sepia tones. The volume of the lighting and the music and the heat and everything, we wanted to all feel like you're just really where you want to be.
What I love about these restaurants is that they're one of a kind and owned by local folks. And now in this week's Sunspot, Lowell Sun Enterprise editor Chris Scott talks with Police Chief William Taylor about the recent tragic death of a child and police protocol in incidents involving dangerous dogs.
Thanks for tuning into this week's edition of Sunspot. With me, we have a return appearance by Superintendent Bill Taylor from the Lowell Police Department.
Hi, how are you,
Bill,
Chris?
thanks for coming in. I wish it was under more happier circumstances, but we're going to talk today about dangerous dogs and what happened on Clare Street. Without saying as much as you can on the investigation,
Yes.
and whether there may or may not be criminal charges and the status of the two dogs here. And we're talking off air, and you shared some information that I think the public would find very interesting. So take it away.
So I think the most important thing is that out of consideration and privacy for the family of the young child, the victim, we've been kind of guided in some of the information we've been released that we were willing to release. And then it is obviously an ongoing investigation with the district attorney's office. So, you know, I had the opportunity on Friday to along with District Attorney Marion Ryan, to go to the victim, the young child's wake, and visit with them and the family. It was just a, you know, an incredibly heartbreaking tragedy. Just a, you know, your heart literally breaks for them and the family. So, but what I can say is that after the incident happened that night, the first dog was shot by our officers out on Middlesex Street.
Right.
And so the bigger pit bull involved in this attack was shot, and that dog died. And then there's a protocol that we handle with a dog that's deceased like that, that we have to quarantine it for a certain number of days, and then there's evidence that is taken and sent down to the state lab for analysis.
You were saying off air to see if it had rabies.
That's
or
right, exactly.
Things like that.
And so that protocol is being followed. The second dog was turned over to the city that evening by the owner. And that dog has been in the city's, in the care of the city's veterinary hospital. And so there's a 10-day period of time during which they observe the pit bull that's still alive. And at the conclusion of that, that's to make a determination that they don't have rabies. And then the dog is examined by the vet, and they give us an opinion. And it was their collective opinion that that dog needed to be euthanized also. And so that was done.
Okay. That's good news to have out there. I think it might settle a few anxious nerves. Tell us about the investigation and where it stands, and is there any possibility that anyone or entity might face criminal charges as a result of this?
So at this point, the investigation still is ongoing with the district attorney's office. There's been no criminal charges forthcoming. I think it's the collective opinion of the police, the DA, and the medical examiner at this point that it was a terrible tragedy and most likely an accident in terms of the classification of the death. So,
Meaning,
most likely, they'll probably, at this point, there's no indication there'll be criminal charges.
you've been in the law enforcement arena for quite a long time. Could you just elaborate on that a little bit? There are probably some people that feel that someone has to be accountable for a 7-year-old's death, and you can see how
Right.
someone would feel that way, but you have, in your position, you have to separate the emotion from what actually happened. So we were talking off air, and you said, refer to this as an accident, even though a 7-year-old boy lost his life.
Doesn't seem right. It seems as though when you lose a young child like that under terrible circumstances, I think we all want to try and make a determination what went wrong, and that investigation is ongoing. And so I don't want to say too much about the investigation,
I understand,
but because it is still ongoing. But at this point, there's no criminal charges.
Okay.
So.
In the wake of that accident, folks from the Massachusetts Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals met with the Sun's editorial board this week to just, it was an enlightening meeting. But pit bulls do have a reputation as being a mean, nasty dog, and they kind of came in to try to dispel that,
Right.
and said that there are many mean, nasty dogs. Can you talk about that a little bit from your perspective, and talk about dangerous dogs in the city and what the police department is trying to do to control them and to monitor them with your animal control officers, which are now under the realm of the police department?
That's right. So, they certainly can speak better in terms of certain breeds, and if one particular breed is more dangerous than another, they're the experts in that area. And so I won't venture into that, but what I will say is I had the opportunity to take a look at this particular dog that our officers shot that evening. And this was a very large, very powerful dog, animal. And when under the particular circumstances, some of the details of it, which again, I'm not going to go into because
for good reason,
considerate of the family. Yeah. This dog was a very large dog, and you can see how this particular dog was overpower a small child like that. It could potentially overpower almost anybody. So what we do in the city is we have 3 animal control officers. One of them is designated as an animal compliance officer, so he has more specialized training and more opportunity to do enforcement activities. And so they respond literally almost 24 hours a day to calls for animals or pets and wild animals that need assistance and people that need assistance with them. But I think the important consideration is, in this particular case, we had not, the police department or the animal control officers had not had interaction with these particular 2 dogs previously.
And so you haven't been to that address
we
for
have
any
not.
complaints or anything like
The
that,
police
right?
department has not, or
Okay.
the animal control
Okay.
officer. So they did not come on our radar screen. And I think it's one of those ordinances that unless the police department becomes aware of it, right, we rely on voluntary compliance in terms of licensing and vaccinations. What happens in this case is if these particular dogs were licensed, right?
Which they were not.
Which evidently that's the preliminary indication they were not. Then the animal control officer would be notified of that. The other possibility is if they get a vaccination, then a veterinary hospital will send that notification through the city to the animal control officer. And evidently that did not happen either. That's the indication.
Do you have any indication of how many unlicensed dogs there are in the city, and particularly dogs that are deemed that you would view as dangerous?
No, and to go back to the
even
earlier point,
anecdotally, or
yeah, the problem is these type of ordinance, we rely on voluntary compliance or a notification to the police department that we should check on them. Would be virtually impossible for us to go up and down every street to try and determine which dogs people own legally and which are not conforming to the ordinances and the regulations.
the 3 animal control officers that work under the police department, what is their average day like? What do they, what is their main focus? What do they try to control or look at?
Right. Well, they have a multitude of different activities. The first one comes on about 6 o'clock in the morning, I believe, and the last one is on into the evening. And they respond to follow-up calls for complaints. There's a lot of complaints in the city for various animal control issues. Dog bites, they follow up on those. Then we get calls constantly for people that need to have either pets or some kind of stray animal removed from the yard at their property. So they are quite busy. And then we contract with a veterinary hospital in Drake that provides the support for us to house these animals and get them evaluated when necessary.
Staying with dangerous dogs for a minute, how do you feel as a law enforcement professional about the breed-specific prohibition that the city passed in 2011, but then was eventually struck down by the legislature in Boston? Do you think that that is a good idea?
Well, what I think is, I think we need to get additional information from the experts, people that specifically can talk from a research perspective about this issue. And I think it would be, it certainly wouldn't be appropriate on my part to give you information anecdotally, what I've seen over the years. I think that, some of the situations we've seen, a larger dog obviously can cause more damage and be more dangerous to an individual because just physically of their size. And so that is a common denominator. But I wouldn't want to get into a breed-specific discussion. I'm just quite candidly, I don't have that information.
Right. What do you think the answer could be to try to help the city get a better handle on this? Because as you recall, back in 2011, there was a multitude of events that prompted the city council to pass that ordinance.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So obviously the city council felt that there was a need to do it, and the city council relies on information from the administration
That's right.
and you. So I imagine that hasn't changed.
No, it hasn't, and we're in the process to trying to get that data so that we can have a better idea to supply it to the city council. So we're looking for that, to see how much data we have and if we can drill down to it to see if it's breed specific.
Would you say that city residents need to be concerned about dangerous dogs, or what would be your advice to city residents that, or to a resident of a particular neighborhood that knows, next door or down the street, there's a couple of a funky pet situation going on there? What would be your advice to those city residents?
What I think is, what I brought up is we rely on voluntary compliance, obviously, but that doesn't mean that we won't check situations out that are deemed to be dangerous. So if people are concerned about pets in their neighborhood that are unlicensed or that need animal control to take a look at it, absolutely call us and give us that information, and they'll respond, they'll check it out, make sure they're appropriately licensed and vaccinated, and then if there's considerations about them being dangerous, we'll absolutely follow through on that and take that through.
Since that happened a week ago Saturday, has the police department changed any type of policy or procedure or the way it looks at issues like this? Did it prompt any type of, I don't want to say a knee-jerk reaction because I don't mean to use a negative connotation, but did it prompt you to get together with all the animal control officers and your command staff to
Not at this point, but we do for a critical incident like this, we will typically go through and do an evaluation on our response and see if there's policy or procedures or things that we can do better, and we will most likely do that when the investigation's complete.
And in wrapping up, the officers that responded to that scene that night were witnessed a horrific incident. Those officers are, they're doing better, and have they all returned to active duty, or are any of them out because of what they saw that night?
Most of them have come back. The vast majority of them have come back to duty. It was a terrible situation, horrific scene. And
you were there too, right?
I was there. But the initial responding officers bear the burden, and they did a tremendous job responding to this, trying to save the child. Unfortunately, it was immediately apparent that the child was deceased. And then they had to shoot the dog in the yard. The first responding officer had to shoot the dog, and then after the dog was shot, the dog still managed to jump this fence and get away and go about 1.2 miles before he was encountered.
Where it took a multitude of gunshots.
Well, people.
Or is that embellished?
No. What I will say is, until you have to actually physically do it, you don't realize how difficult it is to disable a dog like that. They're small, they're quick, and they don't stand still, and they don't have the ability to reason, and you can't communicate with them. So it's a tough situation. So.
Thank you for coming in. I appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in to this week's edition of Sunspot. We'll see you back here again in 2 weeks.
Our condolences go out to that family in wake of that tragic accident. That's it for this edition of LTC News. You can find us on LTC channels 8 and 99, online at ltc.org, or at LTC Lowell on Roku, or get the link each week on Facebook. I'm Alanna Flood. Thank you for joining us.